class, and let's not forget with offensive line recruiting, it can be such a you can, and then see where things shake out from there. So I think it made sense with Penn State. But as you saw, Mike Miranda, CJ Thorpe, Des Holmes to an extent, some other guys, I mean, they sort of passed over, right. I think, Robbie Martin on the depth chart. You have Drew Scruggs coming in this class. I mean, there's a lot of interior. Penn State's actually in really good shape in the interior of its offensive line. I'm not sure if Martin, like you said, would have saw the field, but I don't even know if that matters because, like he talked about in his message on Monday night, he more or less just said that he lost interest in the game of football. So I'm not sure I'm sure it had something to do with it that he wasn't playing much, but even if he was, you just wonder if this was something that wasn't a long time coming.
He had the size to play probably either guard or tackle, but I think he was viewed as a tackle. When he talked a little bit about the offensive line impact, they're pretty strong at the tackle position, not only with veterans. Ryan Bates is a guy that they really like. Obviously, he's going to be one of the best offensive linemen on their team. Chaz Wright, Will Fries. They're obviously their top three. And Des Holmes is a guy I think that is getting closer to being ready to see the field. I'm not sure where Alex Gellerstedt fits in this year, but the recruiting class with the offensive line prospects that they brought in, it might be, when all is said and done, their best recruiting class. I'm talking about the freshmen this year.
Right.
Talk a little bit about Scruggs. Who are some of the other guys? Was it Rasheed Walker?
Yeah, I mean, Rasheed Walker's here. I mean, there's some guys they're looking at in this current recruiting class that if they do land would fit in that boat. You have Caden Wallace coming in, too, as an interior offensive lineman as well, committed in the class of 2019. So Rasheed Walker, you have Nana Asidu, who, of course, we'll talk about a teammate of his in just a little bit. But, yeah, I mean, there are guys that just on recruiting acumen alone, we're probably going to pass some of the depth chart. Now, granted, there's been higher rated guys that haven't panned out, but at the end of the day, it sort of all fell together, I guess, for something to make sense, especially as Penn State tries to get back to being at that 85 scholarship number, which it appears, at least from the outside, to be over right now.
Okay, second down here on the Penn State Blitz. Talk about a quick turnaround. The James Franklin and the Penn State Caravan, it's already over. So I remember when these things started, especially when Bill O'Brien was here. It was like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It was just a grind.
Yes.
And you had to go to all of them. For selfish reasons, I'm glad that it was only a 3-stop Caravan this year.
Right.
But James did have some interesting things to say, and so did Sandy Barbour, Penn State's athletic director. Let's get to what James had to say, specifically about, he mentioned Saquon Barkley and his success. He's number 2 pick with the Giants. He looks like he's got a big future.
Yeah.
James made it a point to say he wants to make sure that the Penn State success stories kind of come back to the program and kind of show, I guess, the current players kind of how things are done, and they're great role models. Can't think of a better role model than Saquon. He also talked about coaching losses, lateral moves, and how Penn State needs to avoid losing coaches to lateral moves. In other words, moves that are, they didn't necessarily improve their standing, but they went someplace else for essentially the same job.
Yeah, no, I think to start with the first thing, I think the whole idea of that is Penn State wants to improve its facilities. This goes back to everything they're doing at Lash, everything they're doing in the locker room, everything they're doing at Beluga Hall. Some of it they've already done, some of it they don't have the money to do. But if you have a place where NFL players want to train in the offseason, not only are they going to mentor your guys, but it's good enough for NFL players, it's probably good for college players. So it's kind of a little bit of looking to the future, but also knowing that the better your facilities are, the more high-level prospects and future potential NFL guys you're going to get on your campus. So I think it sort of all folds into one there as Penn State tries to really take a big step forward in its facilities, spending, and I think that the point right now is that, Bob, they have done plenty since James Franklin got here. But I think it's what happened before he got here, the stuff that wasn't necessarily kept up with, that is what needs to be caught up now, if you will. So that's what I think he was going with when he spent so much time talking about facilities. And then you have the elephant in the room of the Caravan, and that was, of course, the Pitt-Penn State series talk. And I agree with some opinions out there that we don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about this. But, Bob, it's on hiatus until 2030, and I don't think they need to be in a huge rush to bring it back.
And this is something I think that Pitt wanted to continue, but I think it's pretty clear that Penn State wasn't all that interested that when the current series is up, which is that they'll have a game at Pittsburgh this year, and I think the one more game at Penn State in 2019. That's it. And I think the earliest it could come back, if at all, will be like 2030 or something like that.
Yep.
I think when you look at it from Penn State's point of view, what do they have to gain from playing Pitt? They could probably only lose in the minds of some recruits in state, so they probably said, you know, your program, you're going to do it without our help, so good luck with that.
Right. That's how I look at it too. I don't really see any other way to look at it. I mean, for Penn State, if you beat Pitt, you were supposed to lose to Pitt. It's a jumping off point for their program, and you know, I don't see the value in it. I don't, like, you know, Sandy Barbour talked about, you know, she thinks fans want to see Virginia Tech and West Virginia, and I don't know if it's so much of that. I just think that, you know, there's some fans out there that want to see this game and this series continue, but for Penn State's current outlook, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense.
Now, real quick, a couple years ago, Penn State rolled out this facilities master plan.
Right.
And fundraising was a big part of
and it seems
the key to kind of, you know, upgrading facilities not only for Penn State football but other minor sports as well. Very ambitious plan. Fundraising was a huge key, I think, to the completion of that plan. And I think we're learning that, to hear, I guess, Sandy Barbour talk, are they really on target to kind of get this done the way they want to get
it? It really doesn't feel like it. I think that there's a lot of things at play here. Number one, it's not, you know, they have a lot that they want to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know how big the donor base is. I'm sure it's big, but there's a lot of big dollar figures. And the other thing too is that with the new tax laws, you know, the colleges have talked about this, that the way that they're written now, it makes it a little bit harder to do write-offs and things like that with donations.
Right.
So I think that's probably part of it too. It's probably a little bit of a timing issue for Penn State, but they need to figure it out if they want to keep moving these things forward.
And what did James Franklin mean in your mind when he talked about, no, we don't want to lose any more coaches to lateral moves anymore?
Yeah.
What I thought there was a couple things he kind of was hinting at when he said that. What was your read on what his take there?
Yeah, you know, I think that, you know, obviously Josh Gaddis got a raise by going to Alabama, and look, it's Alabama. I mean, you can't really fault anybody for leaving there, even if it is a lateral move.
I don't think it's a lateral move. I
don't either.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, but I mean, I think that, you know, he makes a fair point that Penn State has a ways to go, and probably that area as well when it comes to assistant coach salary pool. There's a lot of things they need to accomplish, and I just think that he's putting it out there that we don't want to lose these guys, but at the end of the day, it comes down to money. And, you know, if your donors aren't, you know, maybe hitting the benchmarks that you have set in your budget, then it becomes a little bit tough. So that's what kind of my takeaways were from that.
Do you think he was also kind of setting the stage for next year if they have a successful year, and a guy like Brent Pry, who has, I think, flirted with leaving the program to be a head coach, and Sean Spencer, hey, here's a heads up, no more lateral moves. We have some good coaches. There's a reason why we've won 22 games the last 2 years. I mean, every year people are probably going to come looking at our coaches.
Right.
We might want to keep an eye on this. Do you think it was also about a look to the future?
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, you have a lot of guys on the staff now that will either have received opportunities to move on or will receive them. And, I mean, just you got to keep in mind at every turn, too, that if Joe Moorhead loses a coach down there, there's who's to say he won't come calling? He might not get an answer that he wants, but that's always going to be in play now.
Yeah, and Joe Moorhead has Charles Huff on the staff, and I think Naeem Wortman, a former Penn State linebacker, career cut short due to injuries, is, I think, a grad assistant for Joe.
And they took the recruiting coordinator as well.
Okay. Third down here on the Penn State Blitz, and it's all about recruiting. There's still a couple names for Penn State fans to keep an eye on. One is Devyn Ford. Another is Antonio Alfano.
That's right.
Where does Penn State stand, and how close are they to deciding?
Yeah, I mean, these guys both decide Friday. I believe it's May 18th. Is that right? I believe that's the end of the week.
It's the day before the Preakness. Yes, that's correct.
So, okay, very good. Black-Eyed Susan Day in Maryland and Decision Day for Devyn Ford.
I base my life on horse racing and handicapping,
that's
so there you go.
Devyn Ford will decide in Fredericksburg, Virginia, a four-star running back, and Antonio Alfano will decide in New Jersey, a four-star defensive end. Ford will decide at 4 p.m. on Friday. I'm not sure yet when Alfano will decide. I think Penn State goes 1 for 2 here. I don't know why. I just get that feeling. I like their chances with Ford a lot. We mentioned Nana Asidu earlier. He is a teammate of Devyn Ford's, and I think that at the end of the day, that and some other things will sway him to pick the Lions. Alfano, I'm just not as bullish on, Bob. I think Josh Gaddis and Alabama have put a really interesting spin on this recruitment. Penn State, again, it's not a lateral move, but now you have Josh Gaddis, arguably your best recruiter, in play at Alabama. And Charles Huff, who was right up there as well as at Mississippi State, not the same as what Alabama has to offer, not really the same as what Penn State has to offer. But
it just goes to show that when you lose guys, they're also, you forget sometimes that they're going to be recruiting against you. Alfano has mentioned a number of times the relationship with Josh Gaddis when he talks about Alabama. I think the Crimson Tide might get him if they push hard enough.
Okay, fourth down also involves recruiting.
Yeah.
Penn State recently, after the fall, said goodbye to Brandon Smith, a linebacker who was a walk-on in-state.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go to camp with the Buffalo Bills as a free agent. I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah.
But another Brandon Smith, who is a 5-star linebacker, not to be confused with the old Brandon Smith,
right,
is now in play for Penn State on the recruiting front. Can you talk a little bit about how good he is, what kind of player he is, and what kind of impact would he make on a Penn State recruiting class?
Yeah, could grow into a defensive end. Looks like a linebacker right now. Not quite similar to Nick Tarburton, but maybe in that
He's not a Pennsylvania kid either, right?
He is not. No, he's from Virginia. He's a 5-star, top 30 player nationally. Has been to Penn State quite a bit. And this recruitment's interesting because he was sort of going along, taking visits. I believe he saw Texas A&M. Oklahoma's been involved. Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, all been in play. He's seen Penn State a lot. And it didn't really feel like a decision was coming. And then all of a sudden over the weekend, he put out that he was going to put out his pick on May 21st, next Monday. So I will be curious to see here. I like Penn State's chances, but when a recruitment ends that quickly, you just never know if there's more at play than what meets the eye. I would make Penn State the favorite as we talk about a week before he's going to make his decision, Bob, but we'll see, and it would be a significant impact. I mean, at some point, you look around the country, and all the big heavy hitters that Penn State is now recruiting with for top talent are getting them. Penn State's sitting a little bit, on the outside of that run. They haven't really got going yet, but if you get 2 of 3 out of Ford, Alfano, and Smith, I think you're really happy. 3 of 3, you're doing cartwheels. 1 of 3, I think you're a little bit demoralized. And somehow go 0 for 3, it's alarm bells time, because this is a group of 3 that Penn State has spent a lot of time recruiting and also sits very well with in the grand scheme of things. I think at worst they go 1 for 2 on Friday, and I think they get Smith. So worst case scenario would be 2 for 3. As far as I'm concerned, we'll see how it plays out.
So they're at 3 now.
Yeah.
You kind of could see them getting to 5.
Right.
And is there any other recruiting news with summer camps are starting to get very, very close? Are there any other announcements, any other decisions? Could you see a case? Could you see a case where they're at just 5 commits going into the summer camps?
I would be going into the summer camps. Yeah, I mean, we're not too far from those kicking off, about 2 to 3 weeks. I'm not sure if anybody announces with the Penn State tie between now and then. Salim Morley, the guard out of Delaware, announces a 3 or 4-star. I believe he was all the way to a 4-star. He announces July 23rd. So that's right before, I think, or the day of the.
I only know a relation to horse racing, so I can't help you on this one.
So it's a week from Arlington, and when you look at his recruitment, I mean, he's been to Penn State a ton, and I just have a hard time seeing anyone but Penn State landing him at this point in time. So that's 6 basically. I think they should be somewhere between 8 and 10 by the time the season starts. I think you're going to see a lot of commitments come out of the woodwork in June, July, and maybe the first week of August. So I think the dominoes are going to start to fall soon. It's been a long wait, and not really one that James Franklin and Penn State are accustomed to. Generally speaking, they've had some pretty big hits either in February or at the Blue-White game the week before, the week of, or the week after. And it's been a little bit slow, but I think the dominoes are going to start falling here starting at the end of this week.
A lot of recruiting news that Greg Pickle just got to here on the Penn State Blitz. Before we wrap it up, are there any pressing questions, comments, concerns from our loyal, ever-expanding fan base here on the Penn State Blitz?
Yeah, Chris, he asked if Ford's a 5-star. I don't. I mean, the way the composite rankings work is that you get 247 Sports, Rivals, and of course 247's with Scout now, and then ESPN, and they merge them together with a formula that relates to stars and rankings and all that. And you move a guy 2 spots on one site, and that could change whether he's a 4-star or a 5-star, or 3-star or 4-star. Now, most of the time it's not changing it much, but I don't know. He could be a 4-star today, a 5-star tomorrow. It just depends how one site might move him up or down. But at any rate, he also wants to know about Julian Fleming, the star 2020 wide receiver out of Southern Columbia, and will Penn State land him? I mean, if you go back and look at the profile that Dave Jones wrote on him not too long ago, I think you sort of get the feeling that obviously his family's very close to him, but I'm not sure he's tied to Pennsylvania, Bob. I could see it playing out any number of ways. Penn State certainly will be in with a shot, though, and it will not be for a lack of effort if they don't land him, but the 2020 kids, they're really hard to predict this far out.
I got one real quick for you. Andre White, the Harrisburg High kid, the linebacker that committed to Texas A&M, I think a couple of weeks ago, surprised some people. A lot of people thought Penn State was a lock. Do you think James Franklin and his staff will circle back and really go hard after him, and do you still see him as a Penn State possibility?
There's no question. I mean, these guys don't just lay down and give up. But I think that, if you read Andre White's comments, it's hard for me to see him. He might not go to Texas A&M, but I'm not sure I see him at Penn State either. The comments that he gave to our Eric Epler just sort of gave you the impression that he was looking to maybe go somewhere outside of what current or more recent Harrisburg Cougars have done. So, will I rule it out? No, I'll never rule it out. But I think it's pretty unlikely. One more for you, Bob.
Yes.
Thoughts on the Pitt series from Mike? We did discuss this a little bit earlier, but let me just run it back in a little bit of a different light. When you talk about the rest of the series here, there's two games left. One at Pittsburgh this year and one at Penn State. Is there how do you see it shaping up? I mean, is there a split possibility? Does Penn State lose to Pitt again, as they did in the first game of this series, or your early outlook of this year's game in September and then next year's final clash until at least 2030?
Well, when James Franklin talked during the Caravan about we can't lose coaches to lateral moves anymore. We got to be able to keep our coaches. We got to be able to pay them the going rate, because we are a top 10 program now.
Right.
If Penn State is a top 10 program, they will win the next 2 games.
Right.
I know that they lost a lot of players off last year's team, but Pitt had some significant losses off their team as well. I look at how Penn State played the last 6 quarters of this series. They got roughed up in 2016 early in the game at Pitt.
Yeah.
But they were the better team in the second half of that game, and they could have won it. And they had the 2017 game in control, I think, from fairly early on. They have the best player or most talented player on the field in Trace McSorley. And I do think that my expectation is that Pitt's obviously going to go all out to win that game, but I do expect Penn State's offense to be the difference, not only in this game, but the next game as well.
All right, Bob. Well, that's all the questions we have for this week.
All right, that's a wrap for this week's Blitz then.